know we have several folks that are going to be talking today, and probably some timelines to keep folks close to. So with that being said, I know that we're all kind of stretched today, particularly, and running from one place to the other. But with that all being said, if we could, we'll start with IHL. If you would, please, Dr. Bennett. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Parks, for the opportunity and other members of the committee to take a little time and share some information about the IHL budget request. Our system, we greatly appreciate the support that we get from you, and we appreciate your hard work in preparing the annual budget. I know this is a difficult task, and I appreciate your commitment to securing resources to help us operate our universities. I'm pleased to have several of our institutional executive officers here. President Mark Keenum at Mississippi State, President Hudson from Jackson State, President Miller from MUW, President Briggs from Valley, and President Ney from Alcorn State University. The other IOs could not make it. They send their regrets, but they did send representatives from their institutions to be here today. So I'll start on slide number 2. We know that higher education attainment increases both personal income and contributions to our economy here in the state. Over the last 20 years, the unemployment rate for individuals 25 and older with at least a bachelor's level degree has consistently been about half the unemployment rate for a high school graduate. Having a better educated population will help combat some of our state's most challenging issues like poor health outcomes, incarceration rates, and the need for government assistance. On the next slide, we often talk about brain drain here in the state of Mississippi and attracting or growing more high-quality jobs that pay higher salaries. This slide shows the 50 highest paying jobs in our state, 46 of which require a bachelor's level degree or higher. Family ties, low cost of living, and access to great outdoor activities are some of the reasons that make Mississippi an attractive place to live for university graduates. But some are lured away by job opportunities in other states. We need a balance between the number of jobs and the quality of jobs if we want to make significant strides in moving our state forward. The next slide further illustrates this. Data from the Mississippi Department of Revenue shows that 71% of the income tax collected in this state is paid by 29% of the taxpayers, and those taxpayers command a salary of at least $70,000 per year. Higher post-secondary degree attainment and jobs to employ these degree earners leads to higher personal income, higher personal income tax and sales tax collections, and more state revenue to support state budgets. On slide 5, we all know that earnings increase with higher levels of education while unemployment rates decrease. Citizens with higher levels of education are more adaptable in the workforce. And these individuals were, for the most part, able to continue working without interruption during the current pandemic. On the next slide, I'm proud to share that our universities are increasing their degree output. We awarded 19,691 degrees in 2021, an 11% increase over 5 years ago. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM degrees, have increased 32% in the past 5 years. We continue to produce nurses and teachers for the state's workforce, with 73% of nurses and 72% of teachers still working in the state of Mississippi 5 years after graduation. We know there's still significant needs in both nursing and teaching, and our universities are actively engaged with our partners across the state to find ways to help grow the number of graduates in both of these critical fields. The next slide shows the relationship between appropriations per student and resident tuition pricing over the past couple of decades. Declining appropriations or even level appropriations coupled with increased cost has made our budgets more tuition dependent. This current trend is not sustainable. We do not want to price out deserving students and families from affordable, quality, higher education opportunities here in our state. The next slide further demonstrates the trend we have seen. Since fiscal year 2001, general fund revenue in the state has increased approximately 68%, while total general fund appropriations to IHL has increased 13%. And general support appropriations for our campus budgets, our main operating budgets, have decreased 3% over that same time period. We believe that we are a major part of advancing the economy here in our state and moving forward the well-being of our citizens. And we're asking for your help. The growth in general fund revenue we've seen this year is great, and it provides an opportunity to address this trend, and we hope that you will take advantage of it. On the next slide, we've talked about the value of higher education to our state. This slide shows the value we offer to our students. Even though tuition has risen in our state, our tuition is still a bargain compared to tuition in our neighboring states. Determining the amount of tuition is one of the most challenging tasks our presidents and chancellor face. Our leaders on our campuses spend a great deal of time studying data, analyzing tuition levels at competitor universities, and discerning what the market will bear for our students. On the next slide, you can see how our tuition at our university compares to some of our competitors in surrounding states. We do our best to keep our tuition as low as possible. But if you look at the institutions represented on this slide, we have institutions that are much smaller, that have lower ranks as far as Carnegie classification, that charge much higher tuition than our larger research universities here in our state. So what is the result? The next slide shows how faculty pay in Mississippi compares to other states. We appreciate the funding you have provided to help move faculty salaries closer to the SREB average. We're making progress, but it will take several years of increases in appropriation to significantly close the gap. As you saw on the tuition slide, our neighboring states have higher tuition rates. So they have a double advantage of collecting more tuition and receiving more in state appropriations. This places our universities at a significant competitive disadvantage for recruiting and retaining faculty and staff. On slide 12, in addition to the challenges of retaining faculty, there are a number of issues putting pressure on our university budgets. The continuing expense associated with the COVID-19 response, will be an ongoing challenge as the pandemic nears the 2-year mark. Federal funding has helped universities weather the crisis, but revenue losses due to COVID is an ongoing issue for our campuses. We've all seen how inflation is affecting the cost of everything: energy costs, the cost of construction materials, and also the challenges associated with our current supply chain issues. All of these issues create challenges for our universities in operating. As you know, cyber crimes like ransomware are a growing threat to businesses and public agencies everywhere. Technology is mission critical for our universities, and protecting our networks from cyber criminals is becoming more and more expensive. Deferred maintenance on our campuses is an ongoing challenge. The skyrocketing cost of building materials, as mentioned earlier, as well as our supply chain issues, make it even more difficult for our universities to keep up with routine maintenance and repair on our campus. So that moves us to, Chairwoman, our request. The next slide summarizes our appropriation request. We're asking for an increase of $35.7 million. I think that's equivalent to about a 4.5% increase in general fund support to be used for salary increases on our campuses. The increases in the subsidiary and agriculture units will also be used for salary increases. We're also asking for an increase in capital expense funding to address our current repair and renovation needs. This $75 million acts in appropriated funds to address facility repair and renovation needs. With these funds, this will have a transformational and lasting impact on the environment on our university campuses. UMC, our academic medical center, is asking for an increase of $12.8 million to address salaries for the 5,600 lower earners at the medical center. And additionally, the medical center is asking for $13.1 million to address some capital needs. Our Office of Student Financial Aid is requesting a $5.3 million increase in order to fully fund the expected applicants for the undergraduate grant programs. Additionally, Student Financial Aid is asking for $3.5 million in additional spending authority to be able to expend gear funds that they received from the governor's office. I will stop here, Senator Parks, and I want to thank you and the other members of the committee for your time, for your attention, and for your service. And I will open it up for questions at this time from me and from our institutional executive officers that are here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I want to address before I open it up to the others for questions, I think it's only fair and it's well overdue and much understated that we need to thank each one of you all and your staff. It's been a tough 2 years. It's been a tough 2 years adjusting to online. So I applaud you for growing that and taking a lot of those federal dollars and making it happen. And that's so important and crucial. And I think it's paid dividends to each and every one of you. And then the efforts that you've gone to get our students back into the classroom and set up those satellite areas for those teachers in them to be able to have that one-on-one. I know that was something that we have battled over the last 18 months. I'm sure there's not a senator or a legislator under this dome that hasn't received those phone calls about their student and their concern of not being able to have that in-class experience or the lack of the training that they felt like they had been missing. So I feel like we have closed a lot of gaps on that into that. I want to thank you. I know that's been a tireless effort on you and your staff, and just knowing that you are in our front line. You have been much asset to the state. And so thank you again. And I will open it up now to the other members of the subcommittee if they have questions for you individually.
Thank you, Senator Parks, for your kind words.
You're welcome. Yes, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I would like to echo those comments and second that for sure. We're very, very appreciative of that. Just one question. On slide number 6, you had referenced the nursing and the education graduates, the retention rate in the state after 5 years. Do we know the statistics on that on the other degrees that we're putting out of the, the 19,000 some odd we put out? How many of them are staying in Mississippi?
We do have data on that. I can't think of the numbers right off the top of my head, but we can certainly send that information back to you and the legislative staff.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Dr. Rankin, could you speak just briefly to our student population? Have we seen an increase or a decrease during these COVID times?
Overall, we've remained, fortunately, relatively stable throughout the pandemic. If you look at the numbers, we've seen maybe a 1-2% loss of students across the system, which quite frankly is much better than we've seen in a lot of other states and a lot of other universities. Although this pandemic has been challenging for our universities and students and families, they still realize the great value that our universities offer, and we're thankful and we're fortunate.
Thank you, Dr. Rankin. Any other questions from the subcommittee? You? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Rankins. Other than the proposals that you've got here in the packet and the other things that we've discussed on finances, what are the particular challenges right now for IHL that go beyond the numbers that we're looking at? I mean, obviously, COVID issues continue to be a concern, but what other challenges are you facing? And if each of the institutional executive officers want to address that separately, I'm fine with that too, but you might be able to give us an overview of what issues are bubbling up right now. Thank you.
I would like the IOs that are here to speak, but I will say, in addition to COVID, the deferred maintenance and trying to be competitive with salaries has been an ongoing issue for us, and that's been exacerbated during this pandemic. As a person with an academic teaching background, I would love to say that students choose universities for our great academic program, and they do to some extent. But the reality of it is students, they look at facilities and amenities. That's how they make their decision. And when they're weighing their options, at various institutions here and out of state, they want to see modernized classroom buildings and residence halls, and that's how they're making their decisions. So we have to address our deferred maintenance needs to be competitive, because if we don't, we're going to lose students. And of course, I mentioned the salary issues and the challenges they present to us in trying to recruit and retain the best and brightest talent on the faculty and staff side. So I will open it up to the other IOs to provide some additional input if you will allow.
Sure, but I really want to focus on things that are not, I understand the salaries issue, I understand, maintenance, building maintenance, R&R, certainly understand the need to be competitive from that standpoint, but are there other things that we need to know about that are not being, that are outside of this pamphlet that Dr. Rankins has given us today, other things that are going on your campuses that we should know about so we can help you, and also so we're not blindsided by constituents that say, well, this is what's happening at my university, my child's university. I'd love to know if there's anything that you're dealing with that we can help understand. Thank you.
happening at Mississippi Valley State University. Along with what we've been talking about, definitely the technology disparities is one of the major challenges for us right now. Again, being in a rural area and being able to offer that type of enhancement has been a challenge for us. And although we mentioned the things that we talked about earlier, our infrastructure and our deferred maintenance is really, really a major concern for our university right now. We actually have several buildings that have been offline for a number of years. And as we're saying, it's really beginning to have an impact as far as being able to attract and bring more students. Because right now, we would like to grow the university in leaps and bounds, but we're locked because of our housing situation. We have several of our residence halls that are offline. And so if we want to grow, which we are going to grow, we really have to look at other populations as opposed to students who need to live on campus. So right now, those are probably the two biggest concerns that we're addressing daily right now.
If I may ask, so do you have satellite facilities as well, other than your main campus?
At this point, we do not. We were operating a center in Greenville, but that we haven't closed it, but we haven't had the enrollment that we need to continue to move that forward. We are looking to rebuild that, so that's an option for us going forward as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will echo what my,
Yeah, if you would take a seat, that would be
Okay.
great. Just so that microphone will pick
Okay.
you up better, that's it.
certainly echo what my colleagues have had to say about the technology needs. We've been fortunate. The federal money has really helped us to ramp up and to move faster than we ever would have thought possible with some of the technology. But maintaining all of that is going to be an ongoing cost that's not necessarily included in that. One thing that we are seeing is our students have a much greater need for counseling and for support services. We were able to add a third counselor through this crisis and have all of them certified to do telecounseling, which has been a big help. But we're also seeing that students coming in, and I think we're going to see the results of this over the next 12 years, students that missed 4 months of education in the K through 12 system, they're lagging behind, and they're coming to us not quite as prepared. There's some catch-up, some remedial work that needs to be done in the beginning of the semester, and I think that's going to be compounded all the way back to those students who missed 4 months of first grade or kindergarten. We're going to see some additional need for support services and have to develop some curriculum to really help those students be a success. And of course, the salaries, those go without saying, the salaries and the deferred maintenance. But I do think we're seeing the impact that the pandemic has had on young people, and it's going to be a while to get them through that.
Yes, good afternoon, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Jackson State University. Two quick things I want to highlight. First of all, with Jackson State, we're unique being in the capital city and dealing with water issues. We're all familiar with the water issues within the city of Jackson. Those affect us as well, and even just this last semester, absent a crisis, we had a situation where a water outage in the city of Jackson caused us to close operations for about 3 days. That impacts our learning, that impacts our campus operations, and it's something that we really have to address, standing up that redundant water supply so we don't have the same interruption in services that you see in other areas. The second, I do have to echo deferred maintenance, and really what COVID has done is highlighted some of those issues and inequities that we found with respect to our campus physical plant. Just this year, I've had to take an entire residence hall offline. And what that does is that impacts our quarantine space as it relates to COVID. So we have to have stricter protocols because we can just not handle an influx of students who test positive and are forced to quarantine. And what we found is that students who we have to turn away or students who are not allowed to be on campus, that affects your retention, that affects their matriculation, your overall graduation rate, and it really leans back into what Commissioner Rankins was talking about, the outcomes, making sure we have those students, those STEM students, to provide the state and really provide them with that great opportunity. So again, we want to always make sure we're looking at those issues. For Jackson State, when I think about water, residence halls, two of the main things that are not talked about quite as much but are really impactful for our university. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud to be here to speak on behalf of Mississippi State University. And I echo everything my colleagues have mentioned to you. Madam Chair, when you were talking with the Commissioner about the past 2 years, and where we are as a system, I think he did a wonderful job. But us as a university at Mississippi State during these past 2 years, in spite of all the tremendous challenges that we've endured, all of us, our university has grown significantly. Our enrollment is up 860 students during this pandemic. And that's remarkable. And that puts a lot greater demand on everyone, our whole system, on our campus, to have that level of growth in just a 2-year span. But the output of our faculty has been tremendous as well. The National Science Foundation rankings just recently came out, and I was very pleased to see that we continue to move up in the rankings. We're ranked 88th nationally in research prowess. We're the only university in the state that's even among the top 200 universities in the nation. Our faculty and our scientists and researchers, in spite of all the difficulties, are continuing to produce tremendous research output, nearly $300 million. And that's huge for our state and for our economy and what we're doing to try to create jobs and economic activity and opportunities for our students to have careers and to bring people to Mississippi. I make that point because, Mr. Chairman, from a student standpoint, we are under pressure to hire more faculty to meet our growing enrollment needs, to meet the needs in the classroom, but also to continue to do the work we're doing in research. And we have to be competitive, and that continues to be our song and dance. You hear it all the time, but it's a fact. Just the contiguous states around the state of Mississippi, the average faculty, and this is for all the universities in the states that surround us, average salary is more than $14,000 higher than the average salary in the state of Mississippi. And so we've got to be competitive in that job market for talent, for people who can continue to provide excellence in the classroom, but also what they're doing in research and what they're being able to provide for the state and for the taxpayers, the common good, the benefit for all of us. And then, again, to my colleagues, that maintenance issues, construction issues, and I brought one issue. My chief financial officer asked me to remind the committee, if I had the opportunity, that on January the 1st, our health insurance bill just went up. We can't, there's so many costs that we have no control over due to inflation and all types of inflationary impacts. But just an example, our health benefits are going up $1.25 million for us. That's another $1.25 million we have to come up with for health insurance benefits. Just our property insurance went up this past year 20%. Trash collection cost, almost $500,000 we had to come up with, increased and just that cost. And then construction materials and our estimates. We have 2 big projects that you all have provided funding for that we're hoping to be able to initiate this year, this calendar year. And working with our architects, they're coming back and saying, based on what you provided for those facilities, that we're looking at somewhere between a 14 to a 20% increase for us to move forward with those construction projects. And then lastly, maybe more from a student-specific standpoint, the president of our student body came to visit with me at the end of last semester. because of all the issues that we're all coping with and dealing with, and especially our students, from a counseling standpoint. And we've hired, I don't know how many counselors, we have a large number of counselors, student support, that work with our students to help them cope and deal with all the challenges and issues that they're dealing with. And we want our students to have a good experience, to have support, and we could probably triple the number of counselors and not be able to meet the full needs of our students. And there's a waiting list, and you triage a student when they have an issue. And if it's a critical issue, we have a partnership with Baptist Behavioral in Columbus, and we get them their help immediate regardless. I mean, we have a wonderful relationship with them. But we assess a student based on the situation they find themselves in, and you may have a wait period. Anyway, our student body president came to me and he asked if he could work with the student leaders and come to IHL and ask for a student fee that students could pay so that we could bring a telehealth counseling to our campus. And I told him, well, we will work with you through our central budget, but the mere fact that our students recognize that there's an issue, and again, that's added cost, and that's more what we're committing to for our students. But, Mr. Chairman, that's the issue you may hear from about the mental health, the mental issues that our students are confronted with, that we all are struggling with on all of our campuses. But we keep our tuition low. You look at our tuition, where it is compared, as the commissioner pointed out, we have low tuition. And yet our costs keep skyrocketing. Our ability to compete for talent and all the issues that we're confronted with, it's a partnership. What we do to serve the state is a relationship that we want to enter into, and we have with you. And you've been very kind to us. And we just hope that as we move forward into this fiscal year, that y'all can continue to work with us and provide the support that you're doing, and recognize all the unique challenges that we're all facing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may address one thing that you brought up then, Dr. Keenum, I think is extremely important for those that might be listening or those that are here, and that's the mental health issue. And this interestingly came up in a discussion I had yesterday about students on campus and some of the strains that COVID had put them under, in addition to other behavioral health type problems that may exist for students and the challenges that they have. We have had discussions, and Senator Parks and also Senator DeBar at this table, and Senator Williams, 4 of the 5 members of this committee, just in the last couple of days, about some things that we're looking to do very soon, hopefully sooner than later, to make sure that we've got as good and as strong of a mental health system as we can have in Mississippi. And particularly that telehealth issue is important. And on top of it, I want to make sure that everybody knows, any student knows that they need to, whether it's through the campus or their community mental health center, to be able to reach out and get the attention that you need, or for other students that may not need that attention, to help their friends and colleagues get the attention they need. And that's an important issue, and I'm glad you brought it up, and I think it's something that we need to continue. Every one of us needs to continue to make sure that our students have the knowledge and the access to those kind of healthcare services that can be critical for them, just all the way around, for their not just behavioral health, but all their entire health and their success in college too. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Through our student health center, we have a relationship. We have a psychiatrist, and we feel very fortunate to have a psychiatrist that's available to our students. Again, our wonderful partnership with Behavioral in Columbus. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner that's on call full-time in our health center, and then our huge array of student support counselors that are there that are trained counselors. And it's just we're all overwhelmed by this. And it's not just a Mississippi issue. This is a national issue on college campuses all across the country. But it takes funding to meet those needs of our students. And so I'm so glad that you and the leadership here are looking at this important issue for all of our citizens in our state, but especially in our university system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think everyone has spoken, but I do have some of the committee members do have questions, so we'll recognize Senator Thompson at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question back to deferred maintenance. Could you define that a little bit more specifically, what those, the big ticket items there would be?
Oh, it runs across the gamut. If you look at the roofs on our campuses, most of them are flat roofs. If you have a flat roof on a building, you don't have water issues. So repair on roofs, I mean, that's a big one, addressing all these buildings with the flat roof on them, because that creates a myriad of other problems that you can find within, you know, the mechanical systems. And it's disheartening when you bring a student on your campus for a visit that you're recruiting, and you're taking them through a building, and you see buckets on the floor that are catching water. And we see that all over the campus, all over all of our campuses.
Well, thank you. I'd like to reflect what Senator Hobson said. You know, we are looking at, you know, we've got different buckets of money this year, the one-time monies, and we're definitely looking at the best way to allocate it, and a lot of it is being looked at IHL. So that's why I asked for a little more deeper dive into what it is.
Well, we appreciate it. We've got an extensive list of projects that we would, you know, like to see addressed on all of our campuses, and we'll be happy to provide that information to the committee. So we greatly appreciate it. You know, one-time money creates an opportunity to address those type needs, and we hope that you'll strongly take IHL under consideration. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And just one more question, please. This goes to the salary discrepancy. We're at roughly 80% of the average. I think Dr. Keenum mentioned $14,000 is that variance. Is there making that up in a year or two? I don't know the likelihood of that, but is there a number that we think would help significantly in retention or recruitment? I mean, obviously the 14,000 to get us the average, I think would be a very good number, but is there like a deeper dive into, is there a plan to, you know, if we looked at this over a few years to try to get that salary?
We have structured our appropriation request. I think this is the third year where we're asking for incremental increases to get us there. And I think it's over maybe a 6 to 8 year period, depending on what we receive from the legislature. So we certainly realized in order to get there that it was not practical to do that in 1 year. So we've structured our request over the last several years to try to get to the average, not above the average, just to get to the average. And understanding that while we're trying to reach this target, our surrounding states, they're further increasing their salaries. So it's a moving target.
Understood. Understood. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee members? Okay, I have one other question. Several of you mentioned the technology issues, and I just kind of want to maybe clean up the thought process on that, or answers. Maybe you guys can give me direction. But I know there were CARES Act funding. There has been other federal fundings that the universities have received, and I think a lot of it has been particularly targeted to the technology levels. So you're saying outside of that, there are still needs for technology, or is it that you just haven't got to exhaust all of those all of that funding?
I think the short answer to the question, and I will let the campus leaders chime in with specific examples, but you are correct. There has been money available, and it has addressed some of the needs, but the needs are so vast that it has not addressed, all the needs. I mean, you can run broadband to the campus, but once it gets to the campus, there's still technology needs on the campus that have to be addressed in order for it to be useful to the users on the campus. But I will let our campus leaders talk about specific examples. But you are correct. There has been money available that's addressed some of the need, but all of the needs have not been met.
And did some of that, you talked about the technology getting to the campus. I guess I'd like to hear also a little bit, was that an expenditure that the universities had to bear, or was that from the cooperatives or whoever is your provider? Have they completed their portion of the commitment, or of the commitments they had, to, especially to some of the rural areas, and providing you the services that are needed, the broadband in particular? If anyone would like to address that.
I think what we were able to do with the monies that we received from the federal opportunities, we distributed that to the individual students. So we had a significant number of students who did not have the technology, either the computers, the hotspots, and those types of things. So we allotted and we bought several laptops and hotspots and distributed that to the individual students. So most of that money that we received to support that went to those individual students. I think the broadband concern is confounding, because although the provider has done some, they haven't done completely, where we have access similar to what I would say other campuses. And so that is something that we are still lacking, and some more infrastructure things need to happen on our end on campus that's compounded the concern. So although those providers have enhanced, they haven't gotten to the point where I would think that our students are able to access and have all the resources similar to what other institutions may have. But ultimately, again, with the federal funding, we made sure that our students, particularly when we went completely virtual, going to their homes, their hometowns surrounding the university, where there were very limited resources and technology available, we provided that support for them individually as they needed it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've continued to work in partnership with our local co-op, as well as with the neighboring counties, to expand the broadband infrastructure and the technology infrastructure. As it relates to the funding that we receive from the federal allocations, we've balanced our distribution of those resources between technology and other physical plant needs and necessities that are required in order to social distance, address some of the distancing, spacing that are needs. We also have a campus in Natchez. We are providing resources, or allocating resources, in order to improve the bandwidth, the reliability, the duplicity of the services that we're providing. And so the resources have been distributed across a number of areas, with particular focus to technology, and then continuing to partner with the cooperatives in order to improve the services, not just on the campus, but in the local community as well, where many of our faculty and staff live.
Okay, thank you.
In Columbus, our issue isn't really the broadband. I think our technology issues, a lot of the federal money we use to install classroom technology, to install microphones and cameras, and to provide all of that. But some of the software, the increases in the maintenance and the yearly cost of those, as more and more things do get automated, they do make us more efficient, but you also have to plug in all kinds of different things to it, and it's an ongoing cost with cost for replacement. The demand for wireless, we've gone through and upgraded the Wi-Fi in our residence halls to make sure that it was good for students who were doing their online studying. But the security also, it's just the amount of attacks that are on a university on a daily basis. We've got things that block all of that, but it's constant to keep people who are diligently, researching all of that and installing all the fixes. Just the risk of cybersecurity risks are amazing.
Thank you.
At Jackson State University, we have prioritized not only getting the technology in the hands of the students for distant learning opportunities, but also outfitting our classrooms in a way that allows us to access technology in the classroom to a broader audience. Supply chain issues are a concern. There are limits on these dollars and there are time limits. And what we've run into at Jackson State is a lot of the different upgrades we're making that require actual products. They are delayed in a lot of instances because everybody's looking for these very same items. So that has caused a delay to a point where we are concerned that the time frame on these dollars may run out before we're able to utilize them for that purpose. So that's a concern. And finally, you have to look at the ongoing maintenance, sustainability. What do we do after these dollars run out, and are we going to be able to sustain this? I think it's very clear that we're going to be in some version of the environment we're in now for a period of time long past those dollars have run out. And so what are going to be the costs to sustain some of the things that we have? Technology maintenance is an ongoing cost. You're never done. So really looking towards the future, how do we continue to leverage dollars for us to meet these needs at our colleges and universities?
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'll sound very similar to my colleagues. We took full advantage of the CARES Act funding. They were a godsend to us as a campus. When we received those dollars, we went to work immediately on providing the latest and greatest and best technology we could bring. We spent millions of dollars on equipping our classrooms. We put cameras in every single classroom. We obviously upgraded our Wi-Fi for the campus, and so that we took full advantage of those dollars for that initial investment for our campus. But as President Miller was talking about, cybersecurity is a big issue for us, and we put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into that. We have one of the largest, fastest supercomputers in the entire nation on our campus, and so protecting that system, protecting our entire network, our grid, is very costly, very expensive, and we don't have CARES Act dollars. We have to use our university dollars for that. So that's going to be an ongoing, growing, expanding expense for our campus.
All right.
You're
Thank
right.
you so
We
much.
were very blessed to have those federal dollars.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question is we know that there are going to be other dollars, and there have other dollars already come into the state for broadband. So the reason for asking that question was if there were other needs from the cooperatives and those type things, we definitely wanted to address that. So thank you for elaborating on that. I appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rankins.
Okay, thank you, Senators, for your time.
Absolutely. please. Okay. A total of 4.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent idea. But thank you, Dr. Woodard, for joining us this afternoon, and I'll let you begin your presentation.
Thank you very much. And you've got some materials that I'll reference here in just a minute. But thank you, Chairman Parks and committee, for having me down here and have the opportunity to talk about the medical center. I want to thank you for your support of UMMC, for your support of IHL. It is very important and does not go without notice. We very much appreciate that. So I want to just start with a bit of a status report on the thing that, of course, is front and center on our minds all the time right now, and that is what's going on with COVID. Today, we've got 125 COVID patients in the hospital. Of those 125, 26 of them are in the ICU. 19 of those are pediatric patients, and of that 125, 32 are vaccinated, so that kind of gives you the breakdown of the patients that we're seeing right now that are vaccinated and not vaccinated. This morning, we get this report several times a day, but the last one I looked at was our 7 a.m. report. This morning, we were holding 25 admitted patients in our emergency room, and I wish that was big news or shocking news, but sadly, it's not. We were talking earlier today to some folks and had a graph that showed our inpatient COVID admissions, and about a month ago, we had 18, and today, 125. Our previous high during the Delta surge was 145, 146, in that range, maybe 147. So we haven't quite hit that previous high, but the numbers are increasing rapidly, as is true for all hospitals in Mississippi as well as in the country, really. We've got a real challenge with staffing, and you've heard a lot of people talking about the nursing issues. There are respiratory therapy issues. You know, it's not just nurses, but that's really the nursing respiratory therapy are really the pain points. We have today in our inpatient hospitals, adult and peds together, 360 open nursing positions. And before the pandemic, there was a nursing shortage before the pandemic, and we would run 40 to 50 short. And if it would get up to 70, we thought that was emergency time. And now, you know, we are well above that. Because of that, we've got, and again, this is today's number, and it changes from day to day, but today we've got 57 beds that are patient rooms, patient beds that are closed because we can't staff them. 20 of those are ICU beds. So you just imagine if we had those beds open, we could decant the emergency department, we could take additional transfers. You know, what I'm telling you is represented at some level, basically at all hospitals in the state and across the country. Today, a little bit around noon or maybe just a little afternoon, Dr. Dobbs and the Department of Health instituted a limited system of care, which is intended to assist in the transfer through our MedCom at UMMC, assist in the transfer of those patients that are most critically ill, the sickest ones. We had a press conference today, and I told some of the members of the press that asked, they wanted to know about transfers and how are we doing in taking transfers, because there have been many instances when patients across the state and a lot of other places had a hard time getting transferred where they needed to go. And our stance is we try to take all transfers all the time, but there are some times when we can't. And in this, I asked them to pull the numbers for me. In the last month, we have taken about 30 transfers a day. So we are having to say no, sadly, to some requests for transfers, but I did want to make it clear that there's still a high volume of transferring going on and that we are still taking a lot of patients. We are doing lots of things like everybody else to try to address this workforce shortage. One of the things that I mentioned when I came earlier and spoke in this room a couple of months ago was offering our own School of Nursing students tuition scholarships in return for a commitment to work for us for a year or for whatever, it's prorated kind of on the amount of the scholarship. And we've had good success from that. We've had good response and uptake from that. And we're still talking to some of our classes, so I think we still don't even know what our final numbers will be. But the point I would make, and this is just a point of information, which I know you would view as logical, is, a nurse with 15 years of ICU experience and a new grad nurse are not the same people. So we believe it will take us a few years to really catch up on this shortfall across the state. But that's just kind of the state of the state today, coming from the medical center. Related to this committee, and while we're here, I want to talk a little bit about budget and appropriations and some of the one-time dollars that are available. So from the standpoint of appropriations, we appreciate the support that we've had. We, of course, based on a few years in the past, would first and foremost say we would hate to see a cut in appropriations, and if there are extra funds to be appropriated throughout the kind of usual process, we would be delighted to be the recipient of any of those funds. As we have in this last 6 to 8 months been thinking about the future, and one day when we can kind of get beyond COVID and think a little bit out into the future and look at our strategic plan, there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that we are very excited about. There are a lot of needs. So when we started getting inquiries about some of this one-time funding and ways that might be helpful to us, we've put together a list of things that we would ask that you consider, and that's in part of the handout that was passed around the room. A special funding request is at the top of it. And so, just to speak to a few of those things, what I would make note of is there are kind of 3 categories. There are some 3 projects on the front page and then several pages of infrastructure. A lot of this overlaps with the information that Dr. Rankins presented with the IHL on the infrastructure projects, and then some healthcare facility investments. And as we looked at these on that front page in particular, the School of Dentistry, School of Nursing, those are 2 schools that we have that are in facilities that are old and they are outdated and undersized for growth. We've got, as you know, a lot of healthcare workforce needs in the state of Mississippi, and these are potential schools. These are schools where there is the potential for growth, but we're at a point where we're operating out of very old facilities, and I know you heard a lot of this before, but in order to really grow like we would like to, these schools will need some investment. And as I said, we have been doing our own internal work on strategic planning and listing priorities and thinking about what we need to do and how we need to do it. And these are things that in the next 3 to 5 years, maybe 6, but 3 to 5 to 6 years, that we know that we have to address. And if there is the opportunity for some of these one-time dollars to be a help in that and to help us address that, I think it is a wise investment for the state and something that will yield returns for the state of Mississippi and all of the citizens. The third thing on that front page is a cancer center. So I believe very strongly that Mississippi needs a comprehensive cancer center that we can all be very proud of, that is patient-centered, that has all the services that a patient needs, that a patient might show up there in the morning with the diagnosis of a lung mass or a breast mass or whatever it might be, and be able to see the specialists that they need to see in one place and have diagnostic studies done, leave that day with a plan of care and a plan of therapy, just like happens at some of the other places around the country, other cancer centers that are out there. When you think about projects that could be transformative and projects that could really change healthcare in Mississippi, this is one of those things that I would ask you to consider investing in. I think it is worthwhile, it is needed in Mississippi, and we have the opportunity with one-time money to do something that's really impactful. So I would ask you to consider those things that we have here on the list. Included also in your packet, we've got a copy of our biannual report. You know, when we don't have a pandemic going on, we try to do an annual report, but these last few years it's ended up being a biannual report. You've got a very high-level copy of our strategic plan. There's a lot of detail that goes under that, but a very high level, and a copy of our most recently produced economic impact. And my purpose in showing these things to you is just to share with you that, you know, we are doing good things for the state of Mississippi. I hope that throughout the pandemic, you've had the opportunity to appreciate that in a way that perhaps was different than before. But we are doing good things for the state of Mississippi. We are a good investment for the state of Mississippi. I'm sure that everybody that comes and talks to you can make that case as well. But I think we are different and special, and am happy to talk about the good things that happen at the medical center. And just to wrap up my comments, and then I'll be happy to have questions, I want to end on a couple of very positive notes. So I'm going to hit a highlight. We have 3 missions. I want to hit a highlight in our clinical mission, in our education mission, and in our research mission. So in our clinical mission, I was just made aware a couple of days ago that our liver transplant program, which is a relatively new program, we just started this probably 7, 8 years ago. I think it was 2013, so maybe that's more like 8 or 9 years ago. That's what happens to you when you're in a pandemic. Anyway, 2013, 2014, we just started the liver transplant program. In the most recent rankings of liver transplant programs, it's number 3 in the country, and that's a ranking particularly tied to patient outcomes. So when we started talking about whether or not to develop a liver transplant program at the medical center, it was a lot to talk about. We've got a long and strong history in kidney transplant and heart transplant. Actually started back in the 60s with those, and have long history, long track record, very impressive programs, but we didn't have a liver transplant program. And some of the work that was initially done was to try to determine whether or not there are enough patients in Mississippi that have to leave the state to get a liver transplant to justify a program, and we felt like it was. So if you make that investment, you don't just go hire one liver surgeon. You've got to have more than one, because somebody's got to be on call, somebody's got to sleep at night, and you know, all those things. And the medical companion to a liver transplant surgeon is a specialist called a hepatologist, and they are hard to find. But you've got to have a hepatologist. You've got to have an anesthesiologist who specializes in this. You've got to have the pathologist who does the work. So it's a big investment, but we felt like it was the right thing to do for the citizens of Mississippi, and so we made that step. It was a little bit of a leap of faith, but we made the step. And now you see, we've got a liver transplant program here in the state that we can all be very proud of. In the world of research, you know, these last couple of years during the pandemic, I've had the opportunity to say a couple of times how well the microbiologist and the pathologist have done in developing tests for COVID, and you know, all of this that wasn't even on our radar a few years ago. And when you think about you know, who's going to kind of get out in front and be the heroes of the moment, most people don't think about the microbiologist. They think about maybe the surgeons, but they don't always think about the microbiologist. But our research teams have had the opportunity to really shine. And the last 2 years, we have hit records institutional records in our research funding. The last year, we closed out at $123.4 or $5 million in research funding. And those are new federal dollars that are brought into the state of Mississippi that help add to that economic impact. And I've shared this with others in this room before. You may have heard me say this, forgive me if you have, but I think it's worth saying again. In our health professional schools, this has been a tough couple of years, and I was worried that students would shy away from going into the health professional schools, but in fact, we have had either record or near record numbers of applications to our schools, and that, I think, has just been fantastic. Our schools are all capable of growing. Several of them are in growth modes. As I mentioned earlier, with dental and nursing in particular, we have great capacity to grow with new facilities, with larger facilities. We've got capacity to grow those classes. And earlier, I heard somebody ask a question about retention of health professionals. The school that I can speak to with the greatest specificity off the cuff is the School of Medicine, and I can share with you that in our medical school, we only take in-state students. So we kind of stack the deck in our favor, I guess, to begin with, but that's okay. And when you look at medical schools and how they do in the retention of their graduates to practice in their state, we rank in the top 10 all the time, and usually in the top 5. So we've got a very good retention track record. You heard Dr. Rankin speak about nursing, and I can speak about medicine. Dental school is also a school that takes only in-state residents, and most of those graduates practice in our state. So I think when you look at medical education and healthcare education, the outcomes, the retention tracking, you know, it's a long pipeline. It's not 2 years from now, it's 10 years from now, it's 15 years from now, but we've got a good track record to stand on, and I would say something that I hope that you are all proud of. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions that I can answer.
Do you have any questions from the committee members? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A couple questions. The liver transplants, do you have data that speaks to how many maybe out-of-state patients that we serve?
So most of our patients are in-state.
Sure.
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but most of them are in-state, and if you want to know, I can get that back to you.
No,
Right,
I'm just curious. I
Yeah,
mean,
most of our patients are in-state patients.
You said that you're getting good response on the tuition reimbursement. Could you speak to a little bit of exactly the mechanics of what you're doing in the response rate?
So what we are doing, we started this back in the fall, and we've got, when you think about the programs, in our nursing school, we've got probably 8 or 9 actual different programs. Some of them are graduate level, master's, doctoral. But what we focused on are our programs that produce BSN nurses, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Those are the nurses that you kind of think of that graduate and go start taking care of patients right then. They're not graduate level, but they are, you know, like I said, the bedside nurse kind of that you think of. So looking at those programs, we have 2 pathways. We have what we call the traditional pathway, where a student goes to college for 2 years and then comes to us. And then we have an accelerated program. So the student comes in with an undergraduate degree already, and then in a year in this accelerated program is able to get the BSN degree. We do that on the Jackson campus from a January to December program, and then we have an accelerated program on the Oxford campus that runs from August to July. So we've got 2 different locations for the accelerated program. So we've got several different groups of students that fall in that category. And when we started in in the fall, it was around October, putting this together, we were looking at what we were spending on trying to recruit through travel nursing and a lot of other things, and really were looking where you feel like you're at the mercy of, you know, the market out there. And we thought, what could we do with the nursing students that we already have? What could we offer to get them to come to work for us? We want to recruit them. So what we have set up, and it kind of depends on where they are in the different programs, but basically for a semester of tuition, they will get a tuition scholarship for 1 semester for a year of commitment to workforce. So the accelerated program, just as an example, is a 3-semester program. It's a year long, but that's broken into 3 semesters. So for those students that just started in January, we spoke with them and said, you know, we will give you a full tuition scholarship for the entire year if you will commit to work for us for 3 years. So that's kind of how it was. Depending on where they were, the students that just graduated in December in the accelerated program, we said, if you will commit for a year, we will give you a tuition scholarship for this last semester you're in. We, you know, like I said, we kind of put this into place as they were already in their cycle. So it's been a little bit different depending on where they are in their program.
Yes, ma'am.
But basically the concept is a semester tuition scholarship for the commitment to work for a year.
What does that equate to in dollars per semester?
So for the accelerated program, the semester charge is around $7,500.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you know what the retention rate is of our nursing program? I know you've got several different paths, but is there a general percentage that you can speak to?
Of the students who are taking us up on this particular
Well,
offer,
if you can
or in
give me
general?
what history has been, and then if you can project what it will be with this, that would be a great comparison.
So I don't know those numbers.
Yeah.
We have not historically tracked, you know, our graduates that enter our workforce and how long they stay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't
Okay.
have that off
That's
the
okay.
top of my head. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else have questions? Senator Hobson?
I can't believe you don't have a question.
Me either. I was holding mine just to wait.
It's 4:30 or something. I know.
But what I do want to do is take the time, as I did with the other universities that we've had around the state, and the teachers and them catering to the students and meeting their needs during this time. And we talked about them being frontline, but to you and your staff, please take the thank yous back, because you have. You have been that frontline. You've been setting a pace. You've been setting a standard, not just for yourself, but also for the state in a lot of ways in the fight against COVID. So again, thank you for your leadership in that. Thank you for all of those that joined the forces with you. And, you know, our hopefulness is with us working through the nursing shortage and understanding, you know, do we truly have one? Do we truly not? Is it just a marketplace event that we're in? But regardless, we feel, and with the respiratory, not just to limit it, but I believe it was called Allied Health Services earlier today by one of our senators, so our chairman. But, you know, it's our hopefulness too that will help in sustaining that and helping equalize that back out. We're hopeful in the next year to 2 years over a 3-year plan program that hopefully you'll hear about soon. So thank you again. Thank you for all the hard work that went in today and presenting this. That does take time out of the day-to-day to get these numbers together, and we do appreciate that and your staff working toward that. If there are no other questions, then we will just say thank you.
Thank you for your kind words and for the opportunity to come speak with you.
Yes, if Alcorn Ag is available, we would like to move to them next, if that's possible. All right, thank you. So if everyone has their handouts, I will turn it over to our speaker.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Marcus Ward. Good afternoon to the committee and all of the staff and Chairwoman Parks for having us this afternoon. I want to thank you for your time. As some of you may know, I'm Marcus Ward, Vice President for Institutional Advancement and Legislative Liaison at Alcorn State University. I'm standing in for our Dean of the School of Agriculture and Applied Sciences at Alcorn, Dr. Edmund Buckner, who is currently out of town, and hopefully we'll have him returning next week and we'll have an opportunity to visit with some of you all individually. I'm joined today by our 20th President, Dr. Felicia M. Nave, who is with us here this afternoon, as well as my colleagues, Dr. Dexter Wakefield, Professor and Associate Dean for the School of Agriculture and Applied Sciences at Alcorn, and Dr. Franklin Shakwama, the Associate Director of Extension and Land Grant Programs at Alcorn State University. I want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to tell you a little bit about some of the opportunities, challenges, and what we see facing Alcorn as we strive to better serve the agriculture needs of the citizens of the great state of Mississippi. As you know, Alcorn State University is a Mississippi treasure. Like many institutions of higher learning, last year in calendar year 2021 presented some unique challenges and opportunities for Alcorn. Despite those tests, Alcorn celebrated 2 milestone graduating classes with over 716 total degrees awarded. We sustained our research capacity of over $15 million, and our Lady Braves cross-country team won their first ever SWAC championship in the school history. We housed over 1,600 students on our campus in Lorman and Natchez, and our students represented nearly every Mississippi county and 34 states, and also 34% of our students were enrolled as first-generation scholars. That's very important. We're going to come back and talk about that a little bit later. On a positive note, Alcorn raised over $3.5 million in 2021, which represented a 95% increase over 2020. So things are looking good. We also saw the growth of record giving from some of our alumni. Our largest gift from one of our alumni donors came in 2021. And I want to talk a little bit about some of our rankings. Alcorn was ranked among premier institutions in the nation, earning spots in the U.S. News and World Report Best Online Programs for Social Mobility and top HBCUs. We were constantly ranked in Newsweek as a top online college, and Online U ranked us as the most affordable child development program in the state. A highlight, for the 4th consecutive year, Alcorn State University's athletic program won the prestigious David M. Hallbrook Traveling Trophy for the 4th consecutive year, which is distributed amongst all Mississippi public universities, and so we won that for the 4th year in a row. But I didn't come to you to talk about all of that. I came to talk to you today about some of the things that we see happening. And first, I would like to say we'd like to extend a great thank you for the 2.5% increase in support the Mississippi Legislature provided Alcorn State University School of Agriculture programs in the FY22 appropriations. We understand and appreciate the immense challenges of the process and the difficulty you have, and are always grateful for the work you do to continue the consistent and unwavering support of Mississippi's oldest HBCU land grant and the nation's oldest HBCU land grant. As the oldest land grant in the state and the oldest 1890 land grant in the nation, our primary challenge is the same as many of our colleagues in our state institutions. We struggle to attract, recruit, hire, and retain top quality faculty, staff, talent. This has been further exacerbated by the ongoing effects of the pandemic, and we're in competition with other states who offer better salaries, better startup packages, and better retention packages to a lot of their employees in their state institutions of higher learning systems. We are currently in the process of trying to fill several key extension and research positions. However, we need a little more help. We could all use the benefit of a little bit more time, but we know that we don't always get the time we deserve to get the things done we need. But with that added time, we think we can attract and retain the best and brightest minds for the state of Mississippi and compete with our surrounding states. We want to be able to pay higher salaries and allow more flexible arrangements like work at home and hybrid work opportunities to be more competitive with those other systems. To help strengthen the agriculture workforce in Mississippi and the Mississippi Workforce Pipeline, this past fall in 2021, Alcorn announced a historic $1 million partnership with Cargill. As a part of its Thrive program, for the 4 years, over 20 students from Alcorn will either intern and/or be hired to be a part of the Cargill family. The program goes beyond just scholarships and provides students with mentoring, development programming, and career coaching to help transform their education into meaningful careers. This is an exciting new partnership, and we create opportunities for our students to excel in and outside of the classroom. We are excited about this program because it adds to Alcorn's rich and growing history in agriculture in this country. Notable Alcorn alumni have included at Cargill include its recent Demetha Sanders, a 1993 graduate and the head of Global Talent Management Executive and Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for corporate Cargill. And a 1996 graduate, Mr. Mark McCann of Collins, Mississippi, who is the North American Operations Lead for over 8 Cargill-owned meat plants in the United States. Those are all Alcorn products, Mississippi products, and we're all proud to continue to produce these great people that go out into the world and make a difference for our state and our nation. This relationship with Cargill is pivotal to the Mississippi poultry industry. Now that Cargill has announced the purchase of Sanderson Farms, one of the largest poultry producers in the world and an iconic Mississippi company. We're continuing our work to better serve our state's poultry industry. It's the #1 sector of our state's #1 industry, agriculture. As we know, last year, agriculture had an increase to over $8 billion impact on the state of Mississippi, according to recent reports. The poultry industry needs talent trained in poultry and animal science, and Alcorn is that place where we will see that talent come from. We have teamed with Mississippi State to develop and offer a dual degree program to better serve the needs of the industry, and we're starting to see some dividends from that program. A student goes to school at Alcorn for 4 years, 3 years at Alcorn, and 1 year at Mississippi State. And then they graduate with 2 bachelor's degrees. They graduate with a bachelor's in science and animal science, and also a bachelor of science in poultry science, one from Alcorn and one from Mississippi State. We need to continue to help rebuild, and update our poultry facilities at Alcorn to strengthen our research. We need help with our ag facilities to replace roofs, boilers, chillers that are deferred maintenance. This is a key topic we know you've been hearing about here lately as it relates to higher ed. And we need help to repair our greenhouse facilities, our swine research facilities, and develop and grow our shiitake mushroom program. For the FY 2023 year, Alcorn State University School of Agriculture is seeking $7,067,114 in state funding. This is a 9.9% increase, which totals about $636,619 over FY 22 funding. I want to first again thank you for your continued support of Mississippi's land-grant universities. We all are proud of what the difference and impact our state institutions are having here in our state and around the world. We provided you with some handouts that spell out a little bit more about our funding needs. Last year, the benefit we provided to the state was worth an estimated $435 million impact. And our students are continuing to compete in scientific presentations, continue to punch well above their weight in every facet of their experience. We're proud of them and the good representation that they bring to the state of Mississippi, and particularly to Alcorn. Again, thank you for your time today and all that you do for Alcorn, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about our request.
Does anyone on the committee have a question?
I hope I didn't cover it all for you.
No, but I do want to tell you thank you. I know this was difficult to get all this information together for us, but we do appreciate it, and it does help us as we sit down to make those tough decisions budgetary-wise. So again, thank you for your presentation. I guess I do have one quick question. The poultry, is that something new that you all have added, or is that something you've always had? You've just now begun that partnership?
So on the poultry research side, we previously had poultry research. We discontinued it for a short period of time, and then I believe 2019, 2020, we reinstituted the research side, re-strengthened the research side of it. It had dwindled down a little bit, and now that we got a infusion of support from Sanderson Farms, Mr. Joe Frank Sanderson there, and we've also got some funding in the last 2 fiscal years, thanks to the Mississippi Legislature, to help strengthen our poultry research. We've been able to retain a poultry researcher, and I believe we're looking to bring on a couple more researchers and research associates in that area. But once again, we face the same challenges and pressures that Mississippi State and all the state institutions face, which is that, the pandemic response is continuing to affect competition for salaries. I'm sure all businesses are facing that issue right now, as well as inflation related to construction costs, supply chain issues. I've heard today talk about cyber threats and, of course, the issues around deferred maintenance on our ag facilities. We could definitely use some support there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. No other questions? All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
So I would like Dr. Wakefield, who's who's the Associate Dean for Education. He kind of has a lot of more insights into how we're growing in the education side, on the academic side of our School of Agriculture.
Okay, well, what was the question again? What we're beginning to see is a pretty stabilization of students, mostly because of a lot of the external things that are going on with the pandemic and so forth. But I guess to be proud, I can say that in the School of Agriculture, our enrollment has increased slightly over the time. So there has been a great need and a great interest in agriculture, as well as our human sciences and our advanced technology departments. So we are seeing some increase in student populations within those departments.
Thank you.
If the Mississippi Charter School Board is ready to present, we would love to have you come forward, and you're welcome to sit at the head table there and speak into that microphone, or you're welcome to the podium, either your choice. That'll be perfectly fine. Okay, if
Denise is not here, our financial person. I mean, I'm happy to start whenever and let her roll in.
yeah, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. Is the PowerPoint ready?
It is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're ready? Okay, all right, very good. Well,
Welcome, and thank you for coming today.
thank you, and thank you for having me. I must say this is my first Senate budget hearing, so a little anxious and certainly green around the edges here, since this is my first time to present to you, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I want to start by just giving an introduction so that you guys will know who I am and what I do and what my experience has been. So I've been in public education for 28 years. I started my educational journey teaching special education in Pelahatchie, Mississippi. I continued to work throughout the state in a variety of different roles. I served in Columbus as a principal, assistant principal, moved to Hattiesburg and spent about 10 years in Hattiesburg working as a federal program director, curriculum and instruction, served as a superintendent. Then for 6 years, I ran the Mississippi Association of School Administrators, which is the nonprofit support state affiliate for AASA, the National Association for School Superintendents. And then 3 years ago, this February, I was tapped to serve as the executive director for the Charter Authorizer Board. So I am glad to be here and honored to be continuing this work in public education. So our slides a little, thank you, slides a little ahead. So just a quick overview of who we are and what we do. You know, the law was signed back in 2013. That legislation enabled us to operate as an independent authorizing board. We have 7 board members. We have 3 board members that are appointed by the governor, 3 by the lieutenant governor, and 1 by the state superintendent. Our law, much to your credit, is ranked 6th in the nation, which speaks volumes to the work that was done prior to its actual approval. Our mission is to increase access to excellent public schools throughout the state in areas where it's appropriate. That is not to say we want 1,000 flowers to bloom and a charter school on every corner. Our mission is to ensure that when we do approve a quality charter school, that quality charter school is held to high standards of academic, financial, and organizational oversight. It is not our goal to create a parallel system of public education where we have, like I said, a charter school on every street corner. The last thing we want to do is to fail children, and so by authorizing only high-quality schools, we will ensure that the children have an academic educational experience that is high quality. When I got to the authorizer board in 2019, the board had strategic core values and a strategic plan, but since that time we have really honed in to ensure that not only do we have those strategic core values, but we have core values that are meaningful, that mean something, that have meat on the bones. So we have a real commitment to not only saying what that is, but doing what that means, right? So with a commitment to transparency, everything we do, every step we take is on our website. You can find board agendas, you can find board minutes, you can find a plethora of resources for applicants, interested applicants, for operating charter schools. You'll find all of our peer reports. Everything we do, we are incredibly transparent about our work and committed to that transparency. We want to be open and honest in everything we do. We also have a commitment to excellence, and you'll see that evidence throughout the peer reports. If you continue to look back at the peer reports, you will see that over time, we have increased our operational efficiencies to the point that this year's report has 7 recommendations, and of those 7 recommendations, 5 are would take legislative action in order to make any movement on those. Just a quick update on the numbers. So nationally, depending on which resource you look at, charter schools serve about 3.2 to 3.5 million children throughout the nation. Right now, we serve about 2,800. That number increases over time as more schools come online and additional schools add grades to the students that they're serving. So we have 7 operating schools right now. We have 2 in pre-opening, and we have 1 that's in delayed status. Our schools are throughout the state of Mississippi right now. We have 5 of our schools operating in the Jackson metro area. We have 1 in Clarksdale, one in Greenwood, which is LaFleur Legacy Academy. We will open 1 in Canton and 1 in Northeast Jackson in the fall of 2022. And I didn't say, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have throughout the presentation or at the end. So I wanted to point this out, and in your packet, you have a complete parent satisfaction survey, all the results from that survey that was conducted in 2020. More than 97% of our parents who were surveyed agreed that the charter schools have high standards. Again, going back to that high quality, high standards, high expectations, high bar. You're going to hear that over and over again. A commitment from us to ensure that that is the only kind of charter school that we allow to operate throughout the state. We have 95% of our current charter parents would recommend their charter school to another parent, other families. I think that speaks volumes to the commitment of and what our leaders and our school leaders and our principals are doing at each individual school. So 2020 was a milestone for the authorizer. It marked a 5-year mark for us. That was the first year that we did renewals. We were, when I got to the authorizer in February of 2019, in the fall of 2019, we were ready to undergo our first set of renewals. And each one of our schools that were renewed during that time got a different renewal. So we've been committed again to that excellence. We've renewed schools for full 5-year terms, which is what the law allows, and we've also given out conditional renewals, meaning that if you don't meet these conditions, you will not be allowed to operate going forward. And so we're very intentional and deliberate about how we hold our schools accountable, and rightfully so, because we have to protect the people's interest, the people's money, the people's children. We also had our first annual framework reports went to the schools prior to me coming on board. The authorizer had been without leadership for about 9 months, and so we were able to put together the first framework report, which is essentially their accountability report. And we give that to the schools so that they know where they need to be in terms of their academics, their operations, or their financials. We've done a complete revision of that framework this year, and we are in the process right now of conducting a trial run so that we see where that leads us. If there are any type of metric issue or any sort of issue that pops up during the trial run, we'll be able to address that accordingly before full implementation. Also, in fall of 19, we issued our first framework report or annual report to you as a legislator. We have our 2020 annual report available for you to look at. It looks different than the others in that it was COVID time, right? And so we did not do a propensity score matching analysis, so we were unable to compare an apple-to-apple comparison of our students to like students in the Jackson area. So this is more of a narrative report as opposed to a statistical analysis report. We also established our first set of task force in 2019-20. We did that in response to problems of practice. We took our first back-to-school tour where our board members were able to go into the schools this year and actually see kiddos face-to-face and see teachers teaching and children learning. So that was exciting. And then I think I alluded to earlier that we have completely redone our website, which again leads to more transparency and opportunities for people to look at what we do and who we are. So I think when I first sat down, I said that this is our first budget hearing, and I think one of the reasons for that is that our budget is and has been appropriated through the IHL bill, and it's been a line item in that bill or in that appropriation. I'm looking to Denise for confirmation on that since the law was enacted, and it has become a bit problematic for us, and I'm going to talk about that on some upcoming slides and explain to you why that's become problematic for us. Our next slide is simply a slide that demonstrates what our funding sources are. You can see our general funds in column 1, our special funds are column 2, federal funds column 3. Our special funds are funds that come from the 3% authorizer fee that the schools have to pay. So in order to operate a public charter school in the state of Mississippi, our schools in their charter, their contract, they agree to pay us a 3% authorizer fee. And that funds a large portion of what we do in our operations, as well as the federal funds that we received through a grant back in 2017. The authorizer was a recipient of a charter school program grant, a federal grant. That grant has allowed us to provide startup funds for new schools and provide staff development, trainings, resources, and a variety of other things, including partially pay for salaries for staff at the authorizer board. The next slide is actually our budget request for this year. You'll see in the first column, and I guess this slide is fairly familiar to you, but the expenditures by object code, or by object, not code necessarily, our FY21 actual expenses, our FY22 estimated expenses, and then finally our request. Our overall request is for a little over $500,000. That's about $200 per child for the children that we serve. We're asking for that, and in order that we can ensure we have appropriate staffing, that we are able to provide quality opportunities for learning for schools, for school leaders, and for our own staff. We'd like to ensure that we have a stable staff, and we'd like to ensure that we are doing things that are legal, decent, and in order. And with that type of appropriation, we can commit to that. The next slides are just to some considerations. I alluded to this earlier, but we need this separate appropriation, and why would we need that? Well, one of the reasons is we've been unable to establish an MOU with IHL for the past couple of years, and that has led to some significant challenges. One being lost checks for our vendors, delayed payments to vendors, disruption in our email service, and disruption in our phone service. We cannot operate if we can't count on our partners to operate for us and to engage in an MOU with us. So we're asking you to consider a separate appropriation for that reason, as well as the others that I've mentioned. Also want to note the charter school program. We're in the no-cost extension period right now. That grant was written back in 2017. It had some very ambitious goals in it. When I got to the authorizer in 2019, like I said, nobody had been there, and therefore no drawdowns, no action had been taken on that grant until 2019. We are now in a no-cost extension period, and that money is going to run out. We are limited in the amount of no-cost extensions that we can request, and we are down to 3. So those monies are going to go away, which will significantly negatively impact our budget. So what do we need? We need a few things, not a lot. We need an upgrade in our technology, and we want to ensure that we have access, full access to the public, and we want to ensure that we continue with transparency. So we have a minimal setup in terms of technology, but we need to upgrade so that we can accommodate those who are in-house and then online. We want to provide for some additional staff for things like communications, public relations, professional development, support to the schools, a few things like that. We'd also like to ensure that we can do a better job from the agency standpoint in recruiting applicants to Mississippi. We want to make sure that those applicants have the support that they need whenever they do come and explore options in our state. We'd also like this money to be available for startup grants when the CSP money goes away. It would be really important for our applicants to have a few dollars to be able to access those dollars. Why? Some rationale, reason for, we didn't get any COVID money, no relief money, no ESSER money, no money at all, no additional funds for the authorizer board. So we operate on a fairly limited budget, and again, when those CSP dollars go away, we're going to be even more limited. We will close out, two of our schools closed out their CSP sub-grant this year, and one more will close out next year. I've mentioned the no-cost extension period that's limited. But again, our goal is to expand access to high-quality schools in areas of high need, and we want to continue to ensure that we are strengthening our practices and establishing sound policies for the authorizer. Because all of our children in Mississippi deserve access to a high-quality educational experience. And I am happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you very much. So does a member of the committee have a question? Okay, Senator DeBar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good to see you again.
You too.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've gotten the Pew report that came out in
Yes.
December.
Yes.
And you talked about no-cost extensions. Will you explain to me, maybe the committee, what it is that no-cost, what is a no-cost extension?
Sure. So when you have a federal grant, that grant is for a period of time, right? So the grant was written for a 5-year period, and you have authority to spend those funds throughout project periods and budget periods. And we will have authority to spend and access those dollars once we get approval by the feds again. So it takes us going out for a request and saying, you know, dear federal government, we'd like a period of time, and it's only a year, to be able to expend those funds and then offer those funds to the schools. So it's just a little bit wiggle room in your timeline for expending those funds.
And this, the grant we're talking about, is that the CSP grant?
Yes,
That's
sir.
the $15 million
Yes, sir.
grant, and you've got,
Yes, sir.
according to the Pew report, and I haven't talked to you since, but you've got about 74% of that remaining, according to the report anyways.
Yes.
Okay. And what do you plan on utilizing that grant
You know,
money for?
the majority of that money goes to the schools. So actually, it's formulated in the grant. 7% can go to technical assistance, 3% to administrative cost, and the rest of it has to go to sub-grants. We've asked them if there was a way to amend the grant and do some other things with that grant to maybe provide options for our operating schools to have access to those dollars, and they have said not likely.
Okay.
So, but we have gone out and asked them prior to the holidays.
And
So.
the report's out, well, less than a month, almost a month now, but
Yeah.
it talked about implementing some type of metrics to track the grant. Is that something the
Yeah,
board
and we totally agree with that. I think that's a best practice to ensure, we do the scope of work, of course, in our contracts, and we do work, we're not going to work with somebody if they're not going to provide the deliverables, and I have good examples of that from my early time at the board, where we had a recipient of charter school funds who was getting, and I will say, $27,000 a month. And that particular vendor is no longer working for us because that vendor could not provide evidence of quality work or any work to that matter. That's actually in the peer report, the earlier peer report too. So I will say that we are very conscious of that and very committed to that, and acknowledge the need to ensure that the contractors we do work with provide the deliverables that we expect them to.
The report also stated or recommended that we look at doing away or at least limiting the 3% authorizer fee.
Yeah.
Is that something, and it said that the board was going to recommend that. Is that the case, or what's the situation there?
You know, at this point in time, I'm not comfortable in saying that the 3% authorizer fee should go away. That provides, you can look at the percent. I think right now it's about 79%. Is that right, Denise?
Federal funding is right at.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at Denise. She does our actual budget, but.
I know, that's fine.
But, thank you.
The federal funds have provided about 70% of the authorizer operating cost, and the special funds have only been like at 10% or 20%. I've got to look at my numbers again. But that being the case, when we lose the federal money that's paying for salaries, fringes, and operating costs, we're going to have to rely on that 3% money because we don't have the general fund.
The federal money you're referring to, that's not the CAP grant, but that's separate money? Or
The CSP.
CFP?
The CSP. That's all that they have. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would say too, Senator, that one of the things I think PEER doesn't take into consideration is that the 3% is dependent on the number of schools we have operating and the number of children who are actually enrolled in those schools. And so should we have a school that closed, we would lose access to those dollars. And as over time, if we continue to grow and expand charter schools, there might come a time where a 3% reduction makes sense because we would have more children, therefore more money, right? So, but right now, it feels like the wrong time to make that type of decision.
And the contract with Republic, that's not been signed yet, so you haven't gotten any, at least that's what the report says.
Oh, are you talking about the fees from them?
Right. Yeah,
Yes. I think we have that. I'm not sure that it's been put in the bank yet.
Okay.
So I think we've received all the 3% fees now from all the schools.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Can I point out one other thing?
Yes, ma'am.
If we don't have the 3%, our funding will have to come from the general fund.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Anyone else have any questions? I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is, are currently all 7 of the schools operating as K through 12, or are they?
No, ma'am, they are a variety of different grade configurations. And so some of them are K-4, one is 6-7 this year. So Greenwood LaFleur, the LaFleur Legacy Academy, that is a 6-7. They began operating as a middle school. They started with grade 6. And so right now, we don't have any beyond 8th grade. That would be a goal, certainly, to ensure that we have a high school at some point in time because our kids need somewhere to go beyond the 8th grade. So.
Okay. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming out today. I know
Thank you.
We're downtown. It's a little difficult to get to us, and it's late in the afternoon, but we do appreciate you coming and taking the time to
Thank you so much.
provide
Thank
this
you for having
information.
us.
Thank you.
Any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have other questions, but it's
Yes,
not appropriations related, so I'll get with you later if
Okay,
that's okay.
okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.